And welcome everybody to the Summit City Sports Report Roundtable. This is for the 2024 season, and we will be previewing week number 4. But before that, we're going to recap the week number 3 games. I'm Jeff Mahoney. We got Tim Atkinson, Joe Northern, Thad Goff, Landon Traylor, and Carson Watkins joining us. And to start off, I was over at Woodland for the Woodland and Heritage game. This is an ACAC game, first conference game of the season for both teams. Heritage picking up the 28-6 dub over Woodland at Woodland's place. So we knew Woodland was going to be very young heading into this one, but honestly, they played very well and gave themselves a chance all the way till the end. You can see Heritage picked up the first touchdown in the first quarter, and that was a Braden Walter touchdown. Braden Walter, we made a lot out of him heading into the season. 4 receptions, 64 yards with a touchdown. He was fantastic. Zeke Litchfield, guys, this is a name right here to remember. He's the tight end. He goes 6'6". He had 7 receptions for 128 yards and a touchdown. And obviously, Eli Tagulis, the senior, was throwing him the ball. But Litchfield right here is one of the best boys volleyball players in northern Indiana. So he'll probably be one of the first big-name boys volleyball recruits to come out of this area in some time now that boys volleyball is an IHSA-sanctioned sport. So keep an eye out for him on the volleyball end. But from a tight end side of things, boy, he kind of reminds you, Tim, of the tight end over at Homestead a few years ago. Leaper that's over at Iowa now. I mean, body-wise, he's just tall and athletic, just really, really looks the role. They already have a serious college prospect in Charlie Riddle, the offensive lineman and defensive lineman. But Zeke Litchfield's another name to keep an eye out as we head throughout the regular season and into the postseason. Nasir Martin was super solid. 19 carries, 168 yards with 2 touchdowns, actually. He also had a fumble early on in the game, and it wasn't just that he dropped it on the turf. It was an outstanding play made by Drew Fleek. If we go over here to the other team, Drew Fleek had 8 total tackles, 3 tackles for a loss. But this is where it got really impressive for Drew. 2 forced fumbles and 1 fumble recovery. So that's him fighting through blocks and then just getting a paw on the ball and knocking it out. So Drew Fleek was the MVP for Woodland. Nasir Martin got the MVP for Heritage. He's a very good-looking running back. And, guys, throughout the season, Eli Tagulis, not many people have played better than Eli Tagulis at the quarterback position. He had a 140.3 quarterback ranking in that game. And then on the season, his QBR is somewhere around a 145. So 0 interceptions, I believe 7 touchdown passes on the season. So outstanding game by Eli and for Heritage. And I think this game just proved right here that Heritage is going to be in the hunt for the ACAC championship. And honestly, one of the big games coming up won't be this week for Heritage, even though they're going to have to win every single week if they want to stay in contention for that conference championship. But the week after, they'll be hosting Adams Central. So you can see South Adams at their place this Friday, and then September 20th against Adams Central, who has obliterated their opponents ever since that opening 20-17 loss. Well, now we will send it over to Tim Atkinson. Tim, you had one heck of a game over there at Chambers Field. Bishop Dwenger coming in with a 0-2 record. Their starting quarterback was hurt, but they ended up picking up the victory at Northside, 14-7. What a game. And Tim, were you surprised by the effort Dwenger put forth and that they were able to pick up the victory?
I wasn't surprised they were able to pick up the victory. What I was surprised with was how quick to the ball their defense is. Their defense is not the biggest that Bishop Dwenger or even Coach Garrett has had in his couple years there at Dwenger. Over, just thinking the past 10, 12 years, This defense is not very large, but they are so active. They time the snap so well. They really move people around. They cause mass commotion, as you see right there, 12.5 tackles for loss. Their defense is absolutely special. It is one of the quickest defenses I've seen for Dwenger. They're right on par. You know, they don't have those big namers like Snyder has with Landon Fry and Brandon Logan and Braylon Fertil, you know, those type of players. But this is a very well-coached defense, and they absolutely get after it. Dealing with a bunch of injuries they had, and they just continue to impress defensively. Only holding Caleb, if you scroll up, Jeff, I think Kingley only had maybe 39 yards or something. 15 carries, 38 yards. Caleb Kingley had absolutely zero space, and that was because he was being met in the backfield at handoff the majority of the time. The couple of times he did break one out for probably a 30-yard gain. That was probably his biggest run. So you see how many tackles for a loss, which was on Kingley, that Dwenger had to keep him at that 38 yards. I have not seen a Bishop Dwenger defense. They lived in the backfield against Northside. It was an impressive thing to see. Tristan Newsome broke out a couple of times. He had an outstanding game, as you see right there on 100 yards passing, but his rushing 112. I mean, that combined total of yardage is a recipe normally for success for a team in the Summit Athletic Conference. And they really bottled up that whole offense. Now, I do need to say Malik Moore was hurt. I believe it was in the first quarter, late in that first quarter. As you look at right there, that was the one and only real big completion that they threw over the top and took advantage. But that Dwenger defense absolutely dominated Northside. And when we talk about it, it's got to go back to you play Brownsburg week 1, the number 1 team in 6A. You play a nationally ranked team in Cincinnati Moeller in week 2, which is basically a 6A team if they were in the state of Indiana. This prepared them for the speed of Northside and all game long, whether it was Tommy Pori, whether it was Dylan Tittman, Houston Ellinger, Gunnar McCarthy, all these kids, Peter Thiel, these kids were absolutely timing the steps so great. And look at that. I mean, they are not being touched on some of these plays, and it's not because of the size. They are reading the blocker and coming off the edge. As you saw, Ellinger right there, the junior, had a masterful game, had that tackle, the fumble, and recovered it himself. Dwenger won the turnover battle, and that's what really propelled them. There's Peter Thiel once again in the backfield. That was ruled a fumble because it was thrown backwards. These defensive linemen for Bishop Dwenger were the most impressive thing I saw Friday night.
Yeah, Tim. And man, just looking at the speed, there's Tommy Pori getting a hand up there. Really impressive. Do you feel like the Saints had to commit a ton of players to the box to be able to slow down Kingley and get that pressure in the backfield? Were their defensive backs manned up on the wide receivers?
Yeah, there was a lot of man, but there was a lot of dropping in zone too, which Newsome had a little bit of wiggle room to be able to run on some of those as the defense was playing zone. But it was just up front, Jeff. It was up front with the front three, and then the linebackers off the edge. Every once in a while, bringing some heat up the middle. But it was basically the 3 down linemen with an outside linebacker here and there. Really wrecking havoc. Northside had no way to handle them all game long. I mean, look at that. It's in the backfield. You have 3 or 4 Bishop Dwenger players in the backfield at almost all times. I mean, it was such an impressive showcase for Bishop Dwenger that could really propel them into a high-level season. When we talk about their offense and Nick O'Keefe, you look at his numbers, obviously not impressive, 3 of 6, 13 yards. He had a touchdown that was brought back due to a holding to his brother, Brady O'Keefe. That was about a 45-yard pitch and catch. He had a couple of sacks. He looked a little nervous there early. There was a big sack where they lost, I don't know, probably 15 to 20 yards on one play. So he was sacked a couple of times, which really came back on those passing yards. Same thing with the rushing, and Gus Tittman and Caden Bush. They were the two main running backs for Bishop Dwenger. They went back into a heavy backfield a lot with no wide receivers, as you see right here on the Caden Bush touchdown. This was after running 3 or 4 plays in that formation and running with the lead back and A.J. Shefferly. Then they flip it out to Bush, and Bush he's not even touched until he gets into the end zone. They actually wasn't touched at all. They were absolutely impressive. The offensive line handled as much as they could with James Early and Masasu. Now, they made their plays, don't get me wrong, but Dwenger and that offense, there's some room to work. There's no question about it. With the injuries I mentioned as well, O'Keefe having another game under his belt. I don't know if Jordan, I think he had his doctor's appointment last Friday. I don't know if he'll be back or not, but as watching the game against Northside, and I'm Coach Garrett, I feel comfortable in Nick O'Keefe. If I have to have him the rest of the way as a sophomore quarterback, he'll get better. The game, you could tell, slowed down for him in the second half. So there's the lead back with Shefferly making that nice little jump cut that we talk about the good backs do. Shefferly's a very strong kid as well. But Dwenger's definitely going to have to get a little bit more yardage if they want to propel and win sectional and a gauntlet of 4A. It is a tough sectional there for Bishop Dwenger. But yeah, their DBs played really well. Northside just, a lot of penalties. There was a lot of penalties on both teams in that game. I don't think that really decided it, but it was the defense of Bishop Dwenger, in my opinion, that ruled the night.
Wow. You hold a team to 83 total combined yards and you still get the victory. So great job there by head coach Jason Garrett and the Saints picking up their first victory. And it's not going to get much easier for Dwenger as their schedule is absolutely brutal here to start off the season.
They host Carroll this Friday, and Carroll's really playing their best football of the year so far, Jeff, after last week.
Yeah, no doubt, Tim. Yeah, Carroll, Homestead, and then you got an up-and-coming Northrop team. Well, up next, we are going to talk with Landon Traylor, who was at Columbia City. And holy cow, Landon, talking about a track meet over there, at least on one side, but Columbia City picking up the 61-0 victory over Belmont. Poor Belmont, they haven't won a game in 2 seasons. I think the losing streak's at about 25 games. I do hear there are reinforcements coming in for Belmont. I think last year their 8th grade team lost 1 game. The 7th grade team was undefeated via Brewer, the radio guy for Belmont. But I guess I should ask you first, Landon, what were your thoughts on Columbia City? And do you feel like this is a team that could compete with Leo and East Noble for the NE8 championship?
Jeff, absolutely I do. This is a phenomenal football team. The way they run the ball is absolutely incredible. They had a 35-0 lead at the end of the first quarter and a 55-0 lead at halftime, Jeff. Their quarterback went 4 for 4 for just 81 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns along with those 81 yards, 4 for 4. He threw 4 passes the entire game. That's incredible. However, Trace Parrish, their star running back, with 103 yards rushing, 346 as a team, Jeff. The way this team runs the ball, I think, is going to carry them to compete with a team like Leo, with a team like DeKalb. There's a lot of great matchups coming up in the NE8 soon, and I'm excited to see Columbia City, Leo, East Noble, and DeKalb hash it out coming up later. Stratton Fuller's another one I want to talk about. 4 total touchdowns for Mr. Stratton Fuller, 2 rushing, 2 receiving, and he had 154 total yards for himself alone, Jeff.
When you're looking at that offense, Landon, who is their prime running back? Do they have one, or is it going to be running back by committee? Because we've seen some good things from Landon Fazio.
Yes.
You talk about Trace Parrish, and then Landon Atkins led the team with 6 carries for 67 yards. So not too bad there either. An 11.2 average with 2 touchdowns.
Right, Jeff. But what I saw is Trace Parrish is their number 1. But you're right. It's by committee. Whoever they feel, they all have speed. They all have serious speed, and they can make a play happen in the blink of an eye. That's what I saw, because they all made big plays in that game against Belmont.
Grayson Bradbury, the senior quarterback, 4 for 4, just absolutely perfect on the night. Wasn't asked to do a whole lot, but what were your thoughts about his decision-making during those 4 plays, his arm strength? Did Grayson Bradbury look the role to you?
Absolutely. He can air it deep. He can air it short if he wants to. He had a route where pressure was coming to him from Belmont. He threw it to a wide open Stratton Fuller. So his ability to read the defenses is absolutely phenomenal. Blitz is coming on him from the Braves early in the first quarter. He whips it over, lob pass to Stratton Fuller, who's wide open. He knew it before they even touched him that the blitz was coming, and he even pointed it out to Stratton, and that's why Stratton was able to cut it over to the other side and score.
So for Belmont, we don't have any stats from the game for the Braves on the season. They do have their first 2 games, but who are some of the guys that really stood out to you from Belmont?
You know, they played 2 quarterbacks. However, I will say Ethan Curtis didn't do too bad as the stats may show. He was under pressure the entire game, Jeff. I mean, Columbia City was lighting him up from snap number 1 on the defensive side of the ball. But Curtis, he stuck it out. They rolled him back out there down 55-0, get some more reps in. And Jeff, if with a little bit more development and a little bigger offensive line, I think Curtis could be a solid quarterback for the Braves coming up.
Yeah, it sounds like once they can get that offensive line figured out a little bit better, they're going to enjoy more and more success. So that's outstanding right there. Columbia City with another big game this week as they are going to be hosting Huntington North, but we'll get back to that one. Up next is Thad Goff. Thad, you were over at Snyder where the Panthers pick up their 2nd straight victory. This time it was over the Concordia Cadets, 41-6. Snyder, boy, Aaron Vance continues to impress for them. That defense continues to be awesome. You know, one of the things that I found interesting, if we come over here and look at the 6A polls, you got Warren Central now at number 3. And Warren Central, look at this, 34 points they scored against Warsaw, 30 points against 6A North Central. So Snyder's defense has held them to their lowest point total of the season as well. Something to keep in mind as the regular season progresses and we get closer to the state tournament. But Snyder, they're really starting to put it together, it seems like, especially offensively, getting more and more production.
They definitely are starting to put it together. And I could say a similar thing about Snyder's defense to what I said last week about Wayne's defense against South Bend Riley. You know, Snyder, they give up that touchdown on the first possession of the game, and any defense could start to get down on themselves, start to fold. That was not the case with the Snyder defense. They did give up some big plays, but they were able to toughen up down the stretch, and they held Concordia scoreless for the rest of the game. A big key for Snyder was the guys up front, the defensive linemen. Adam Blakey, I believe he had 5 for loss, 2 sacks. Kenyon Conklin got in on the pressure as well. He had a sack as well. Batted the ball at the line. You know, one of the things that those defensive linemen are constantly taught, if you can't get to the quarterback, if you can't penetrate that O-line, get your hands up, try to knock the ball away. And Conklin was able to do that. He overall had a great game. Those guys up front made a huge impact for the Snyder Panthers. I mean, I did recognize 2 particular defensive guys as co-players of the game when it was all you could have recognized that entire defense as players of the game. And that's one of the guys you just pulled him up, Alan Bolton, 2 picks in that game, and that was just a beautiful read by Alan Bolton. He absolutely jumped that route and stole that pick from Jack Andrews. Although I think that might have been Braden Corbett who was in at quarterback at the time. They did pull Andrews. Nope, that's Andrews, number 9. They did pull Andrews late in the game for Corbett, the younger guy. But speaking of Jack Andrews, one thing I can say about him, the arm strength is definitely there. The poise in the pocket I do think that's there, but he was just going up against a tough defense, very resilient defense, and ultimately that defense just that defense shut him down in the end, and that's a credit to Snyder. That's a credit to their coaching staff. I think Andrews will grow and improve, and we'll see good things from him as the season goes on. But that Snyder defense, just an outstanding game. Now,
yeah, here you see Vance on the read option right there. Tim and I saw that in week 1.
Right.
It's just maybe he didn't get as many yards against the Warren Central defense, but the maturation process of Aaron Vance seems to really be hitting its stride as you see him stride now a first down right there.
Yeah, that was one of 2 carries for Aaron Vance in the game. They were big carries. They were very good carries. For his stats for the entire game, he throws 15 for 29, 135 yards, 2 touchdown passes. Those touchdown passes were to Jordan Davis, rolling out of the pocket, little play action bootleg type of play, more like a RPO type of play. And as far as the line for Davis, it basically shows that, we saw last week he had all those rushing yards for East Noble, and a quarterback running the football is certainly a good thing. But what it showed today or this past week was Vance, he can sit in the pocket. He can throw the football. He can find the open man. He can trust his running backs to lean on them to get the running yards, and he can be a part of the running game. And I think that's what makes a zone read type of offense so dangerous, is when you've got running backs that you can lean on, and then you as a quarterback yourself can also contribute to that running game as well.
Yeah, Davis was fantastic, and so too was the freshman Braylon Burton. Just talk about that, Thad. He wears number 36. Not a whole lot of people knew about the young running back before this past Friday, but he put on a show himself at Spooler Stadium.
Well, the yards and the fact that he got in the end zone certainly show that. 113 yards, that's impressive for the freshman. I'll tell you what impressed me about this kid. There were multiple times in that game where he took on contact. You ran into, in one case, it might have been a couple of defenders, but he took on that contact, got himself an extra yard or 2, even caught a pass out of the backfield, had to take on some contact to get a first down. And there's a little example of that. I think that's Zach Spielman that he took on there, and Spielman's no slouch at linebacker. But from what I saw from Braylon Burton, good vision, good power, good toughness. He's got the makings of a very good running back. And I think you already said it, he's just a freshman.
Yeah, and legacy too, Thad, is his dad, Willie Burton, an outstanding player in his own right. And runs some training camps and stuff around the area. This kid's been motoring. He's been training for this moment since probably he was in 3rd, 4th grade. It's awesome to see it, and he looked impressive.
Yeah, he showed it in this game, and there's an example of some of that vision, the cutback ability by Burton. That was his touchdown. That gave Snyder the lead, and that was a stretch in the game where Snyder actually forced 3 straight turnovers. They cashed in all those turnovers with points. But yeah, you're right. The fact that Burton has been training this long for this moment and future moments to come, it showed on Friday night against Concordia.
Right.
Yeah, and then going back to Concordia, minus 20 yards rushing. So it's kind of a similar situation, you feel like, with them and maybe a Belmont, where the pieces are in place, maybe just a little light in the offensive line.
Yeah, I would definitely say so, especially considering the pressure that Jack Andrews was under. And, again, that's a credit to Snyder's defense. They are known for getting pressure on the quarterback. They are known for being big, being tough up front, and they showed that against Concordia. One thing that's definitely there, the arm strength that Andrews has, he's got plenty of arm strength. That's not a concern. The weapons are there. He's got reliable receivers like Avery Cook, Jack Belshner played a big role in their offense. That's not a concern. The talent is there, but it's definitely a team that could use some growth. And I think we could definitely, I think if we see some more, shall we say, variety in the passing game, I mean, yeah, obviously the deep ball is going to continue to be a part of that game, but if we can see some more consistency of going for those short reads, those short throws, to get to orchestrate those scoring drives, this team could start to make some more noise as the season goes on. I think we're going to I think we're going to see a good showing from Concordia this week when they take on Northside. That being said, I think we're going to see a good showing from Northside too. I think that's going to be a fun, high-scoring game, and I think Concordia will bounce back from this Snyder game. I don't know if they'll win. I'm not predicting a winner, but I do think that it will be a fun game, and I do think that we'll see this offense start to really generate something. I mean, not that they didn't generate anything. It's just that they scored on the one drive and then were kept scoreless the rest of the game.
Yeah. Thad, any similarities between Corbett and Andrews when they're switching at quarterback? Do you feel like they kind of run the offense the exact same?
I'd say skill set wise, as far as the certain abilities that they bring to the table, I think they're a little similar. I think Andrews has a good understanding of the offense. I think he's got the tools of the arm strength and the pocket presence. So I would say my guess would be it's probably going to be Andrews going forward. I mean, he had a game where the points didn't show it, but he showed plenty of ability going forward. So I think Andrews is probably still the guy next week over there at Chambers Field when they take on Northside. I do think that there's some similarity in skill sets, but I think Andrews has the better arm strength and the better pocket presence or pocket confidence, if you will. He's kind of like as far as sitting in the pocket, like an old school quarterback. Sit in the pocket, find your receiver, throw the football.
Got it. Well, up next is Carson Watkins. He was over at Leo. Leo, one of the few ranked teams that we have in this area.
Right.
I was looking at that the other day thinking, man, when was the last time that Fort Wayne area was so underrepresented in the top 10 polls? But Leo is actually represented quite well in the polls. In 4A, they're ranked number 5, New Pal's number 1. But Carson, obviously Norwell, after having the great season that they had 2 seasons ago, it's still been a little bit of a rebuilding process for them. And Leo just picking up right where they left off with a commanding 55-13 win against Norwell. What were your thoughts on the Lions?
Yeah, you kind of just said it, but not a lot to be said about this one. Leo's pretty dang good, Jeff. They started off and they had a drive, and John Harrell kind of said this was projected to be a little bit of a runaway win for Leo, and they came out in their first drive and just kind of struggled. They went 3 and out, took a sack and a penalty, and you're thinking, okay, are they overlooking their opponent? Are they potentially trying to work something out? And then after that, it was a run play up the middle, and then Brock Schott took a screen pass 65 yards, and it was on. And it just it didn't stop Jeff from there. Norwell was able to scrape across their first 2 touchdowns of the season, one on a blown coverage on a slant route, and then the other one was a read option play. Castle took it to the house. It was about a 65-yard run. It was pretty impressive. It was a great read, but Leo really just got out there and proved why they're a top 10 team in the state. And Norwell's, like you said, they're going to have to build back up. They certainly got some pieces.
Yeah, who are some of those pieces that really stood out to you from Norwell? Obviously, Kraft is one of them.
Yeah, Kraft was really good. And also they had a running back. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. It was a long name, but he was out for the game. He was their top rusher, a junior. My apologies for blanking on his name, but a couple underclassmen. I think Castle's a junior as well. So a couple more pieces. They did lose a offensive lineman about a year or 2 ago. Went to Bowling Green. So those talent. The talent exit hurt them a little bit, but I'm excited to see what they can do in the future.
Yeah, and your player of the game, Logan Kloss.
Yes.
Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, he was, obviously Brock Schott's going to get all the attention. Logan Kloss had a great game, both sides of the ball. He was blocking really well on some of those rushing touchdowns for the Lions. Played a great corner. Was locking down receivers all night. Had a couple touchdowns himself. It was kind of hard, when you're trying to pick a player of the game in a game like that. You're kind of look at the stat sheet, figure it out. But I really liked the tangibles I saw from him. He kept playing the whole game. That's easy to do when you start running away from a team, is let off the gas, and he never did.
Wow, and here's that big touchdown by Graff that you were talking about. So just kind of wide open right there. Good to see it, though. Take us through this play right here. 64-yard bomb.
Jeff, we can't see it.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. Sorry, guys.
I mean, I think it looks great. Oh, there it is.
There you go. Take us through this one right here.
Yeah, I really like that clean pocket. He just got right past his defender, and that was a beautiful catch and run. I mean, he was gone right away, and this was really, like I said, about not giving up 64 yards. I mean, that pass was about 30, 40 air yards right there, and I really like to see the offensive line. I'm always a proponent for the guys up front. Really good protection there, giving them time in the pocket to throw. And this one, like I said, on the slant route, he just went a little bit looks like Leo didn't have a safety back there to watch. Obviously not a huge deal with where the score was at the point, but for Norwell, you just got to take the positives where you can find them. Scraping across your first 2 touchdowns gets you moving a little bit, gets some good offensive plays going, and this is Brock's shot. I mean, what else could you say? Indescribable, Jeff.
Yeah, you're that big, and you're just pulling away from the defensive backs. You know, in real time, did Schott look as fast as Landon Hepner out there? We just saw a long touchdown reception for Hepner. Here's one for Brock. But in real time, Carson, did you get a sense that one maybe looked a little faster than the other? Or what?
They I don't know. If we got them in a 100-yard dash, I don't know who would win it, Jeff. But they were right there with each other. But the good thing about Schott was, I mean, he was out there doing the dirty work too. And, you know, I got to give him credit. You know, he obviously has this big commitment to the University of Miami, Florida. And, you know, he could be out there kind of just going through the motions. He was out there blocking. He was out there catching passes. He was down the field. Just major credit to that guy, man.
Wow, and look at Foster right here. Beautiful spin move. Got off 2 tacklers right there. What were your impressions of the running back?
Oh, Foster was amazing all night. Once again, credit to the guys up front. Looks like right there, as you see. I mean, 4 carries for over average 20 yards. And you saw in that last play there, Jeff, he was bouncing off of guys.
Yes.
I mean, a couple spin moves. If you don't have to listen to my voice any more than you have to, but if you hear I almost was like, oh, he got brought down. I thought he stepped out of bounds, walked that tightrope, and just outran everybody. I mean, you can't teach that.
No, absolutely. Well, Landon, I guess we can stay with you then for your upcoming game. This week you have Carson. Let's just stay with you. DeKalb at East Noble. This one right here, I feel like is going to be a good game, and it's going to tell us a lot as far as the NE8 is concerned. You can see East Noble's right here at number 13. You're not going to see DeKalb on this list, but I feel like DeKalb is playing just as good as almost anybody in the NE8 right now. Pretty excited about this one, Carson?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, fun fact, my cousins are starting offensive linemen for DeKalb. It's the first game I'm going to get to call my cousins in it. So,
well, you say cousins or
cousins? Yep. Miles and Max Brockhouse, and then my little cousin. He's a freshman. He's a freshman on varsity. He's also a backup tackle. So,
because their offensive line is very, very good.
Yeah, they're those Brockhouse. They're like I said, the Brockhouse boys. They're some big dudes, man. They've been telling me about it. I'm 7 years older than the oldest one, and he's a foot taller than me. It hurts my feelings sometimes, man. I gotta be honest with you. But 4 years ago, DeKalb won 1 game against Huntington North. This has been a great rebuild for them. Executed it perfectly, and kind of like I said, a little bit of insider knowledge, if you will, being around my cousins. These guys have grown up together. Small community up there. They've been playing together since Rocket, and they're seeing the fruits of their labor here. I'm really excited to see this one.
Yeah, Caden Hinkle, one of the top rushers in the area. They're going to rely heavily on him. Obviously, Dylan Krell on the other end anchoring that defense. Boy, if you had to lean towards one team right now, who do you think gets the win over there up in Kendallville?
I got family events to go to, Jeff. This is a tough one. I really like that East Noble running game. I've been very public about my Dylan Krell fandom. It's going to be a tough one. I'm really excited to see what DeKalb can do. Their defense is really going to have to show up against Crail and that offensive attack. I think East Noble has a little bit of a sour taste in their mouth after that loss to Snyder in the two-day game. I think they're out looking. I mean, that Kendallville shows up. That's going to be a tough environment for DeKalb to play in. I mean, I've done several East Noble games the last couple of years. They've always been close to or at sellouts from the first game of the year till the sectional tournament. So it's going to be a tough one. I'm going to back off of it. I'm not making predictions. I'm not in that business. I want to have a good family reunion here, so I'll be quiet.
Okay, sounds good. We will go to Landon for the next one. Leo at New Haven. Boy, DeKalb did a good job of slowing up that New Haven offense. Do you think Leo can do the same thing?
Jeff, New Haven is in desperate need of a win, and unfortunately for the Bulldogs, their schedule just continues to be against them. It looks like they take on Leo. New Haven. They're coming in 0-3. They had a tough loss against DeKalb. They're allowing 39 points per game is the Bulldogs, and then they're scoring at will with 30 points per game. New Haven, it's all about can they run the ball. They were held to under 70 yards rushing against DeKalb. They were 0 for 12 on third down against DeKalb. If they can run the ball and control the tempo, I think New Haven will have a shot at this game. However, I just think Leo's offense is going to have a field day with them.
Yeah. How do you feel about the two running backs over there at New Haven? Felt like they were slowed up a little bit in the DeKalb game, but man, against Shaw and Jasper, the two big, edge rushers, you think that run game can get going against Leo?
Jeff, it's going to be a tough task to ask of the two running backs for New Haven. We've seen it all year. They did a great job running the ball against Northrop. They were in that game. They did a phenomenal job running the ball against Lures. They were in that game. They did not do a phenomenal job running the ball, not even close to a phenomenal job running the ball at DeKalb, and you see the result there on your screen.
Yeah, and I know DeKalb, we just talked about it with Carson a little bit. Their offensive line is solid. Feel like the strength is that defensive line for New Haven, especially the interior with McGrant and Jesus Diaz. So that will be a fun one to keep an eye out on, and Landon will have it for you at New Haven, 7 p.m. kickoff. Well, Tim is going to be back at Northside 3 weeks in a row at Northside, Tim. So,
they love me at Chambers.
Yeah, they do love you at Chambers, and they got one of the best statisticians in the area, and Joseph Walker. So
yes,
we always appreciate Joseph. But Concordia at Northside, Thad really thought that this was going to be an interesting game. I'd agree with you. Can that Concordia offensive line muster enough to get a running game going against Northside? It'll be interesting to keep an eye out on.
Yeah, I think that's the key, Jeff, to be honest with you. Throwing the ball 60 times against Northside, I don't know if that's going to be a recipe for success. The other thing is Northside and Coach Johnson, they are so disappointed with how last Friday night went. I know that their offense is going to be absolutely ready. And do you think that Caleb Kingale is going to be held under 50 yards for back-to-back games? That's going to be a tough ask for the Concordia defense. I think it's promising with Concordia hanging in that ball game with Snyder last week, as long as they did after an impressive 2-0 start for the Cadets and head coach Tim Manigal. But I think they're going to have a little bit of balance. Now, of course, Concordia is going to throw the ball more than they're going to rush it. That's no problem. So if that's the case, it's going to be key for whether it be Andrews, which I expect it will be for the majority of time, or Corbett. But I think Andrews, if they can stay clean with the interceptions, moving the ball around, because they have weapons in Trent, Belshner, Cook, Campos. They have weapons out there on the outside, and we've seen that Coach Manical is not afraid to throw it. We'll have to see about the injuries of Northside as well. How is Malik Moore going to be back this week? It sounded like when we talked to Coach Johnson, Leslie Woodson would not be back yet. He's out for 3 or 4 weeks or so. That's another defensive piece that you're missing on that line. I truly expect James Early Jr. to really pin his ears back, along with Willie Ivy and some of the other defensive linemen, to really go get the quarterback. If they know and they get these cadets into long passing situations, second and long, third and long, and they can really pin their ears back, I think it's going to be a tough one for Concordia. And now Northside, this will be their third game on their new field at Chambers Field, Jeff. They are 0-2 right now. They are going to be absolutely hype and ready to get that first win. But on the other side, holding Tristan Newsome in, we saw exactly what he can do against Dwenger. We saw his capabilities. He made that beautiful throw when he had to, really read the pocket well. He's a tremendous player, an athlete, and is one of the quickest players in the state of Indiana. If you see some highlights of him running the ball last week, it is absolute speed for Tristan Newsome. He is a very talented player. I think he's going to continue to get better at the quarterback slot. I hope the Northside fans don't give up on this team yet. They're still in a sectional that they can win with the talent they have. You see, he sees the hole right there in Newsome, and it's good night. I mean, you got it. And that's why Dwenger did so well, is that they did break out a couple of times, but you see how they corralled them. They kept 2-3 guys inside and out. They knew where the damage was going to come from. And Tristan Newsome really, really excelled at that. With Malik Moore going down, we'll see a little bit more BJ Johnson there at the wide receiver. Will we see a little bit more of Jermaine Harrison, who played decently for Northside this past Friday night. But I truly expect Caleb Kingley to have a big game this coming week. We'll see it, because Concordia knows, and head coach Tim Manigal, he's a smart character. He's a smart football coach. Has been doing it for a long time. He knows how to game plan against these Northside legends. But that's some of the stuff right there that Caleb Kingley can do once he gets into that second level. He's tough to bring down. So it's going to be key with Spielman and company there on defense. Spielman's got so many reps in his career at Concordia. I expect a big game for him, a high tackling game for Spielman. So, I think Concordia, playing a little bit with house money, started 2-0. They're looking for a 3A run in conference play, and playing teams like this here coming up Friday in Northside is going to only prepare them, win or loss, for the sectional. But this could be disastrous for Northside if they get a loss and start 0-2 in the Summit Athletic Conference, and losing momentum, Jeff, is going to be a tough one, as you see Concordia sectional right there, a completely winnable sectional. Garrett's definitely improved. Lakeland's got some players. There's no doubt about that. You saw Woodland, but they're young. Can the Fleeks, propel them to a sectional? But, Concordia, in my opinion, with the weapons they have, with Andrews and the wide receiving core that I mentioned, if you could get Victor Sawyer moving a little bit this Friday, he doesn't have to get 100 yards, but 50, 60 yards total. And then with the passing attempt, Concordia can pull the upset very, very well here at Chambers Field Friday.
Yeah, like you said, Tim, just enough to get your defense a little extra rest, just keep them off the field. So I like that for sure. And Thad, you are going to be at Columbia City for the Columbia City and Huntington North game. Boy, this one should be another good one in the NE8. Huntington North, they were one of those teams to start this season that was really, really turning some heads with the success that they were having. The big win against Eastbrook, 58-37 against Northrop. A lot of that in the second half without Callison, the starting quarterback. But last weekend, getting the loss 28-16 against East Noble. So if we're thinking Columbia City is as good as we think they are, then they should probably pull off a very similar win against Huntington North. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are, Huntington North probably felt like they got hit in the mouth after that first loss, the loss to East Noble. 28-16 after putting up 38 points at Eastbrook, 58 on the home turf against Northrop. The not brand new home turf over there at Huntington North, but they did put in artificial turf not too long ago. But I think they're probably feeling a little bad taste in their mouths, and they're looking to take that out on Columbia City. One thing that Huntington North has going for them, Mike Eschbach, their head coach, he's been a head coach in the state of Indiana for quite some time. Had a good run over at Eastside, including a 9-2 campaign in 2014. Had a brief stint at Concordia, and then I guess had the year off before taking over at Huntington North just last year. And first year head coach has a 1-9 campaign. That happens from time to time, but the first 2 games for Huntington North probably a decent sign that they seem to be on the up and up.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. They got some good-looking players over there. Tall task heading over to Columbia City, but once again, that should be a fun one. Your thoughts on Columbia City, Bradbury, Stratton Fuller, any other guys that maybe you got your eye out on, you can't wait to see perform on Friday?
Well, one guy I'd say to keep an eye on the offensive side would be Tyler Faust. Week 1, the opener against Churubusco, Faust had 2 touchdowns. One, I think, was if I remember right, it was a fade route to the corner of the end zone, and then I think they hit him for a deep ball, if I'm not mistaken. Stratton Fuller, obviously a big player to point out. They have 2 guys Columbia City does on the defensive side that are some of their leading tacklers. Ethan McIntosh, the senior, and I believe this is his brother, Corbin McIntosh, the sophomore. Those guys have 17 tackles apiece coming into the season. Each of them got Ethan got 1 tackle for loss against Belmont. Corbin got 2 tackles for loss against Belmont. And their leading pass rusher, a junior by the name of Avery Fremion, 3 sacks on the season. Now, Columbia City they're not, numbers-wise, they're not getting a whole lot of sacks just yet, but Fremion's having a good season. So this Columbia City team, they've held 2 opponents scoreless so far, and there's some talented pieces on the defense to watch out for. Now, we talk a lot about Grayson Bradbury, and he deserves a lot of it. But Columbia City, they run what's called a flex bone offense. You guys probably know this already. But for those of our viewers who aren't so familiar with the flex bone, it's basically kind of like a triple option offense, or similar to the old school wishbone offense that Georgia Tech ran for a while under Paul Johnson back in the late 2000s. It's a very run-heavy offense. Often you'll see 3 running backs in the backfield, and it's kind of a running back by committee, which we've talked about Columbia City. They basically are a running back by committee this year. Trace Parrish, 103 yards on the ground this past week, 5 carries. Landon Atkins, 6 carries, 67 yards, 11.2 per, 2 touchdowns. Stratton Fuller, two big carries, 69 yards in the game. Devin Meinica, 4 carries, 7 yards. Tucker Reed, 1 carry. It went for 25 yards. These are Landon Fazio, 2 carries, 9.5 per carry. This is a lot of guys touching the football and all doing different things with it, but all producing when they touch the football. So it's going to be fun to watch this running game. I would say there's no telling who the leading rusher is going to be at the end of the night, but I do think that Columbia City is going to generate plenty of yardage with the running game, and then that may in turn open things up for Grayson Bradbury and those weapons that we talked about, Tyler Faust and Stratton Fuller. I think things will definitely open up in the passing game, especially considering that you got to key in on all these different running backs. And with 3 running backs in the backfield, it's hard to key in on all 3 of them. You got to play fundamentally sound football, and you don't know where the football's going.
Yeah, sometimes it can be really hard to see who gets the ball. You mentioned the defensive player that leads their team in sacks, and his name is Fremion. But I got to ask you guys, when a player gets a sack, should that be recorded as a TFL also, or should those 2 be separate? Some teams include it. Obviously, Columbia City does not.
I'm going to say it should, because you did create a negative play. I mean, yeah, a sack is a special kind of tackle for a loss. You got to the quarterback, but it has the same effect as to if you were to tackle a running back in the backfield, or opposing team runs a reverse and you stop their receiver in the backfield, it has the same effect. So I think it should count as a TFL.
I'm on the opposite side.
All right.
I like them that they're separate. A tackle for loss means it's not a quarterback sack, so it's easier to decipher the numbers, I guess, when I'm looking at it, a week before or whatever it is, and I'm looking at stats. If they combine those sacks with the tackles for loss, that can really inflate it. And I like to have them separately, so I can see that, me personally. But I get what you're saying, Thad, for sure.
Yeah, you would just like to see something consistent across the board, because
100%.
some teams definitely count a sack as a TFL, and then those numbers, like Tim mentioned, get inflated when normally they're in two different situations, a passing situation and a running situation, but that's all good. Last game we're going to look at here is Joe Northern, who's heading to Heritage for the South Adams game. This is going to be a very telling game, as Heritage will be hosting Adams Central the following week. But Joe, your thoughts on this one?
Well, taking a look at the ACAC as a whole, and in the group message last week too, there was a lot of coverage going on in the ACAC. And this week is kind of what I like to call not moving week necessarily. You're looking at that next week with the game with Adams Central. But by goodness, this is a packing week, if anything, because you have three teams at the top of 3-0. And of course, with Jay County taking on Bluffton, that's going to be another great matchup too to keep your eyes on at this point. But for South Adams, they've been a team that's been consistently over 500 over, I don't know, the last 7 or 8 years at this point. And if you have a loss against what we've seen to be one of the premier teams in this region in Heritage, excuse me, that's not going to be your team that you're going to see finish below 500 for the first time in quite some time. And taking a look at the history between these two teams, at least in the past couple of years, last year falling 34-14, they are going to have some work to do against a very powerful Heritage team. Now, keep in mind, they do have a lot of young talent to keep in mind, especially with Lehman averaging just about 24 yards per game on the rushing attack, but it does go through Ramirez with 1 touchdown on the season as it stands, but getting average about 46 yards per game. So keep him in mind. But they do have a really good core of receivers, 2 really good juniors in McKean and Juarez. Again, both averaging, let's say, 13, 14 yards a game per pop, at least for my numbers. So again, they're going to have to be a team that's going to have to slow down the high octane of what we've seen from Heritage, which, if we could take a look at their numbers, again, you talk about a team that has come to work all season long. Now, granted, to this point, Heritage is either faced against teams that are or have had a losing record coming into this game. So again, not necessarily moving week per se, but a packing week, if you will, against the South Adams team that doesn't want to be at the bottom of the pack. And we talked about, too, with Braden Walter, a really good key receiving receiver. Zeke Litchfield, he's getting under 70 yards per game as well. Nasir Martin, again, you talk about the king of the rush. He's the king of the rush, averaging 123 yards per game. This team has a lot of offensive momentum. And as you said, big boys on tackling too. That is going to be an absolute key. That's really just going to continue to give teams fits across the board. I don't want to say South Adams is completely out of it. We've seen stranger things happen in the ACAC, but it definitely feels like a packing week game going into next week's activities. But then again, we've seen stranger things happen out of desperation too.
Well, and I guess, since we're talking about the ACAC, you had mentioned Bluffton's game coming up here. We got Woodland, and then they'll host Jay County.
Jay County.
Boy, next week is going to be a big, big week in the ACAC.
Absolutely. You have pretty much, again, 3 teams at the top, 3-0, and then the next team closest to that hasn't even kicked off conference play until this Friday in Adams Central. I mean, again, you take a look, that is a murderer's row, and you could start to see a lot of division really take flight. Maybe not necessarily, maybe not necessarily this week, but coming up next, and that Jay County Adams game, we could start to see a little bit of that division coming up. But it is going to be a wild and wacky ACAC, and Heritage just wants to keep the course and keep things moving.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun one to keep an eye out on. So Bluffton and Heritage, both undefeated in conference play. Well, I should say undefeated overall. Jay County and Adams Central, both with one loss. And then the bottom three teams, your South Adams, Woodland, and Southern Wells. So, and guys, obviously there's a ton of games, especially in the SAC this week, that we won't be covering. Did anybody have any thoughts on any of these? Tim, I want to start with you.
Yeah.
With Carroll heading to Bishop Dwenger. Both Landon and Tim, your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I think that Bishop Dwenger defense, as I mentioned earlier, is different. They are just different this year. Now they're going against a Big Ten, future Big Ten quarterback, and Jimmy Sullivan, who's an absolute stud. He's got weapons. Their defense is sound. I mean, almost 400 yards through 3 games, and he's playing 6A teams in the first 2 games. He's an outstanding player. There's a reason that Iowa went after him so hard, and not only at Iowa, a lot of Power Fives went after Jimmy Sullivan. He's a very talented player. You see Van Pelt and Rode, Shealy, Bauman. They have a nice collection of wide receivers there at Carroll, and then Green and Starks in the backfield. Jimmy can run it as well, as you see right there, actually leading the squad in running, taking a little bit after his dad there and a little bit of the speed. But Jimmy Sullivan is a game changer. There's no doubt about that. It's going to be interesting to see the youth on the cornerback side for Bishop Dwenger. I think it's going to be huge for Pori, Theo, McCarthy, Ellinger, Tittman, for those guys to make pressure on Jimmy to be able to help out those DBs. Now, you got a great safety in Brady O'Keefe that's been back there. Ryan Groves is back. So they have the pieces back there now to break up those passing, and they just dealt with the running quarterback in Tristan Newsome. I think this is going to be a really tight game between the 6A Carroll Chargers and the 4A Bishop Dwenger Saints.
You know, Tim, back when I was in middle school and going through high school, of course, at Carroll, this used to be smash mouth football.
Right.
Dwenger, Carroll. I remember there was a goal line stand, I remember a few years back, that was just incredible. I think we're going to get a game just like that. It is actually rain in the forecast, and it was raining on that night. So we could see a lot of running action from both squads. We could see a battle in the trenches. Personally, I want to see a battle in the trenches because 49-0 last week for Carroll. Great win. They needed it. I want to see a smash mouth, great game of football at Bishop Dwenger. I think that's what we will see too.
Yeah, Carroll obviously handling business against Southside. Wow, just last week at this time, we were probably thinking Carroll runs away with this game. And going back to Jimmy Sullivan, a lot was made with those 2 losses to open the season, but 6 touchdowns, just 1 INT, averaging 6.1 yards a carry, 2 more touchdowns. I mean, he is really being careful with the football while trying to do as much as he humanly possibly can to get his team in a winning situation. One thing I will note that I thought was interesting was Harry Shealy, who's a sophomore wide receiver, does not have a catch on the season. Landon, do you know, is he incorporated at all in the offense? Because boy, when I saw him last March, he was the MVP of that Traction AP showcase. He is a really good young player.
Jeff, unfortunately, I haven't gotten to watch Carroll football at all this year. I've just been catching up on Twitter, so I do not know the answer to that, but I'm sure he does. He has to.
Yeah, just a really, really good talent. So, well, that'll be a fun one to keep an eye out on. Another big game is Wayne at Bishop Luers. Tim, was it last year? Yeah, last year at Bishop Luers. That was the breakout game for Isaac Zay. And a lot of people expected Wayne to win that one, and Luers just kept on getting better week by week, eventually to a state championship. You think anything changes this year when Wayne heads to Bishop Luers as far as maybe being able to pick up a victory?
Yeah, I think Luers right now is kind of where Dwenger is with they're playing really good football at the right time. And we saw it with Luers last year, dropping their first 2 out of conference games and then had an outstanding and getting a partial title of the SAC. It looks like Coach Lindsey's got that same recipe going here this year. I expect a high hitting game. I expect quite a bit of scoring out there. Kamar Nelson, so hard to deal with. I don't care if you're 3A, 4A, 6A, whatever you are. Kamar Nelson is an absolute stud. Thaddeus Solomon, he is a tremendous two-way player. If H.J. Dillard can get it going, or whoever they got at quarterback at that time, if Austin Mack can get
Harold Mack,
can get involved in it, the passing game a little bit more. You say 7 receptions, but just 54 yards in the one score. Jacob Sharon, I know he was injured. I don't know if he's going to be back against Lures this week, but I think Lures continues their winning ways this Friday. Coach Lindsey just has them in the right mindset, and they got a breakaway player that can take one to the house anytime in Davion Surrey on the special teams. A very special athlete is Surrey. You see Williams right there, the bulk of the carries, 61 carries, almost 500 yards in 3 games. That is absolutely insane. That's Kamar Nelson type of stuff. Williams is a fun player to watch. Hogue is very athletic. And then you see Surrey's name right there. But I expect a battle come this Friday out at Lures. But if Landon's right, let's hope he's not about the rain come Friday. All right, Sandy Thompson, we need to keep that to yourself next time. But, if the rain, let's not forget, Lures is grass field.
That's right.
Wayne has a lot of speed. When it rains on grass, the speed is less available. So that could come into play come this Friday as well.
Yeah, outstanding, almost world-class speed on both of these teams. And I like the size that we've seen from Lures, especially with the 2 Taylor transfers, the 2 defensive linemen that came in from Homestead.
Right.
I mean, that Jaron Trailer is an absolute beast. Landon, you got to see them a couple Fridays ago at New Haven. What were your thoughts on the size of especially the defensive linemen over there at Lures?
Well, I got to see him for a half, Jeff. And from the half that I did see them play, if you can stop Navion Gibson, you got size on the defensive line, and that's exactly what they did. So that should tell you enough about the Bishop Lures defensive line.
Yeah, that's gonna be a fun one right there. And then the other game, Snyder at Southside. I know we'll be covering that one. Steve and Aiden are on the call at Southside. You can't help but love cheering for the Archers. Unfortunately, Snyder's just got a really good senior class and one of the top defenses in the state, as is evident really when you look at Warren Central and what they're doing against other 6A type programs. We talked about Carroll at Dwenger, so it should be another good week. Guys, anything else that you wanted to add maybe about
Jeff, you're doing the Homestead at Northrop, correct?
Homestead at Northrop, yeah.
What are you thinking about that game come this Friday out there at Spooler?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the number one thing is David Collison, right? When David Collison's playing, he's one of the top throwers in the state. As we saw after 2 weeks, he was ranked number 7. Gotta run, gang. So if Callison's playing, this game is up for grabs. Yeah. I firmly believe that. I'm really curious to see if Homestead can get a rushing attack started against Northrop, because obviously pretty much everybody that's played Northrop has been able to run the ball. So who is going to kind of separate themselves? Is Thrash going to be the primary runner? I'm sure White will get his carries, but I think in a game like this, Homestead has to feel very confident. Therefore, they can try out a couple different pieces at running back, but we'll see if Thrash remains the guy. Kennedy, I'm super excited to see him, the junior wide receiver, first name Carter Kennedy. But heading into the season, I was thinking that Cale Swager was one of the best wide receivers in Northern Indiana. So, but unfortunately, it just really hasn't worked out for Homestead the first 2 games. But last week was super impressive with their win over Wayne. Once again, just kind of getting it done the way Homestead does against Fort Wayne area competition. They quietly just handle business. And as you can see, 22-8, Wayne getting that touchdown in the fourth quarter. They really weren't tested too much in that game. Michael White completing 13 of 23 passes. So you love the completion percentage, but the 2 INTs. Now, that being said, Wayne's got a very good defensive backfield, and maybe when it comes to the pair of corners, maybe 2 of the best corners in the SAC. Lures would argue that, and Snyder would argue that, but nonetheless, they got talent back there. Harold Mack at safety as well. So you would like to see that not happening in games like this for White, but I'm very curious to see how he does in this one. I'm sure Homestead's going to want to establish the run game, not have to use their quarterback, but also I think they want to get a guy like Cale Swager some kind of highlight type numbers, maybe 11 receptions, 180 yards, and 2 or 3 touchdowns. Try to get the same for Kennedy. I think it's going to be a fun one. Northrop has got to get something shored up with that defense. That's for sure.
Yeah, too many points. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and if you just look at Northrop heading into this one, they've given up 48, 58, and now 40 against Lures. So, but with David Callison out there and all the weapons they have at wide receiver,
right?
Let Callison be the quarterback. Let Jamari Brown go back to being the fantastic offensive weapon that he is, and not have to worry about the whole Wildcat stuff.
Right.
So, should be fun though.
Yeah, should be an outstanding Friday night. Once again, tons of coverage that Summit City Sports has this coming Friday. It's outstanding. I always say, make sure you guys hit that notification bell, or you're going to miss a lot of our activities, not only Friday, but throughout the week with our volleyball and soccer coverage as well. So, but yeah, it's going to be an outstanding Friday night. If it rains, we know who to blame.
Yes, 7 games on 7 games on Friday night and 1 on Saturday.
Yeah, Blackhawk Christian on Saturday as well. Yep.
That's right. So, well, folks, Tim Atkinson, Thad, Landon, we had our other guys. Some of them had to jump off because of commitments, but we appreciate you guys supporting Summit City Sports. Another great weekend of views, a lot of highlights tweeted out there for the guys to retweet and just enjoy. So Jeff Mahoney, Landon Trailer, Thad Goff, Tim Atkinson, have a great rest of your week, everybody. We'll have a few more coaches interviews coming up this week, and obviously the game's on Friday. So thanks for joining us.
See you guys.